I like Voidfall better. That is such a cool. Okay, is that the one we've got here? You said that you're scared of opening.
Yeah, we've had it for a
chickens.
bit. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna go open it. I'm gonna open it.
No, because that means I have to sort it.
I'm gonna go open. No, I'm gonna open it and sort it. Why is everybody scared of this game?
No, it's not that we're scared. It's a 2-hour sort.
I don't mind.
Why?
I love doing that stuff.
Why are you guys
Sorting,
terrified
organizing.
of a board game? It's a children's play
Where's
thing.
the word terrified come from?
I keep hearing the shaking in your voice. We have Voidfall, and I don't want to be the one to open it.
That's okay, guys. I got your back. Hey there, folks. I am Jeff, your tabletop technician here in the Dice Tower. And yes, I'm taking one for the team here to review Voidfall, a game so heavy that I can only be bothered to lift the lid into the frame, and so complex that no one in the studio in Miami wants to touch it. Voidfall is the newest release from Mindclash, designed by Nigel Buckle and David Turczi, featuring art by Ian O'Toole. Mindclash is well known for making big, overly complex games with significant overhead and steep learning curves, and I think nothing makes that more evident than the trepidation from the folks there at the studio to crack this ostrich egg of a board game. And I gotta be honest, I can't blame them. There are 967 components in this box, not including 3 different rulebooks. This of course means that I cannot begin to teach this game in much detail in this video, but I will of course try to summarize the gameplay as best I can. This is going to be a longer video, I'm warning you now, so feel free to jump to here if you just want to get to my thoughts on the game. For now, let's cue the B-roll. A playthrough of Voidfall always has to start here with the scenario booklet, which is organized into solo, cooperative, and competitive scenarios, the latter 2 of which providing options for 2 to 4 players. With the scenario chosen, you'll then set up your play area to match the layout shown in the booklet. You'll be guided where to place each sector tile, the population of each tile, and the fleet strengths of your primary enemy, the Voidborn. You'll also place a variety of bounty, glory, and reclaim tokens, impassable void storms, and even harbingers of the Voidborn throughout the universe. This part's important, but I'll get back to it. The scenario booklet will also tell you which 8 of the 14 different factions in the box will be featured in your game, 4 for the players to choose from, and 4 more to dictate the technologies available in your playthrough, as well as which factions might be present as fallen houses for players to conquer. Voidfall plays over 3 rounds called cycles. Each cycle starts off by revealing a galactic event card. There are 11 cards for each cycle available in the box, but your chosen scenario will narrow that selection down to just 3 possible cards for each cycle. Each card will trigger 1 or more events either at the start of, throughout, or after a specific turn within the current cycle. These will often be a mix of benefits and burdens for the players. They'll also provide 1 or more scoring opportunities that will trigger at the end of the current cycle, and lastly, they'll indicate how many turns each player will get during that cycle. Before I get to the actions a player might take on their turns, let me cover the items a player will have in front of them. Up first is a player mat specific to the faction they chose during setup. That mat features 3 distinct population tracks, areas to store inactive and active fleet power, as well as slots for technology cards along the top and agenda cards along the bottom. As part of the setup, you'll also choose 1 of the 2 startup cards for your faction. These will dictate your starting technology, starting resources, and the configuration of your 2 starting systems, your population, fleet ships, and any available guilds or upgrades. I want to be clear that I've left out a ton of little details here, but I also want to get to the part of how you actually play the game. Now, every player will start off with 9 focus cards, though some of the factions will add or even replace some of those default cards. Each of these cards will show you 3 specific actions you can take with that card, some of which have costs shown at the top of each action. On your turn, you'll choose any one of your focus cards you haven't already used in this cycle, and then choose 2 of the 3 actions to trigger on that card. However, if at the start of your turn you have an available trade token, you can spend it to instead take all 3 actions on the card, assuming of course you can afford to do so. In addition, if you have an agenda card in your hand and the focus card you chose matches one of the two symbols shown on the agenda card, then you can trigger the action shown on that agenda card at some point during your turn. You can then tuck that card beneath your player board, opening up some new scoring opportunities, or discard the card from the game. How you feeling? A little lightheaded? A little peckish? Does this help?
Take Tylenol for any headaches. Might offer any cramps.
Okay, now I'll talk about the actual actions you can take on your turn, and don't worry, I'll only cover the first dozen or so. You could install a new guild onto a sector you control. Doing so increases the production of the resource associated with that guild based on the value of the population die on that sector. Also, if you increase the population of a sector with this action, all of the production levels of resources produced on that sector are adjusted accordingly. You track your production and resources on this small tablet, and you'll use this thing enough throughout the game that it will start to feel like a prop on an episode of Star Trek. When you produce goods, you'll increase the number of resources you have by the production value shown in the small window of the production dial, which is not equal to the level of production of that good. Next up, you could build an upgrade onto a sector you control, and surprisingly, there are only 3 options here. A shipyard lets you build ships on that sector, a sector defense helps protect that sector from invading ships, and star bases, which requires a technology card, are essentially both of those previous upgrades combined. Now I mentioned ship production, which, not surprisingly, takes a bit of effort in Voidfall. Each player has a number of cubes representing fleet power. You'll start each game with inactive fleet power, active fleet power, and deployed fleet power. These standees, which I should mention are only included in the premium galactic version of Voidfall, don't actually represent your ships. They just indicate which type of ship each cube placed onto the base of the standee represent. So if you want to add another corvette, you'll use this action to simply add another cube to the base. That cube, however, has to come from the active fleet power area of your player board, and if you have no cubes there, you'll first have to use this action to slide one over from your inactive fleet power. Those are most of the actions you can take on the main board, but I do want to briefly mention the actions involving your player board. These actions involve upgrading one of your 3 population tracks, which then let you take the action shown underneath. A lot of these actions will be ones I've already mentioned, like placing upgrades or guilds, producing resources, etc. But some of the factions in the game will start to show some unique actions on these tracks that help create the asymmetry between the different factions. Up next is gaining a technology card. This action lets you take a technology card from the display and tuck it into the top of your player board. First, you'll gain a bonus for doing so, and possibly some points if you're the first to claim it. There's a ton of variety in these techs, and I'm not about to go into them, but there are also improved versions of each tech available. But you must first have the base version of the tech already in order to upgrade, and you have to have one of your population markers beyond these spaces on your player board for each upgraded tech you want to acquire. I also mentioned agenda cards. This action lets you take an agenda card from this display. I also already talked about how these can come into play on your turn, and you'll gain points from any agendas tucked under your player board at the end of each cycle. But each agenda also increases the upkeep of your civilization, which is paid with food at the end of each cycle as well. That is, unless you use this action to claim a trade token, which must be stored on an agenda card, covering and thus negating the upkeep cost. Agenda cards won't score at the end of a cycle, however, if they're corrupted. Oh crap, I didn't talk about corruption. Corruption is a common theme in Voidfall. Sector population, agenda cards, population tracks, and even the agenda card display can all become corrupted with these pieces. Corrupted agenda cards are skipped during scoring, and corrupted sectors are often not counted when scoring agendas. Corrupted population tracks don't trigger the actions that they land on, but in addition, corruption on your player board have another negative consequence. At the end of each cycle, the Voidborn will attack each player with a fleet power equal to, if not greater, than the number of corrupted pieces on their player board. So you're incentivized in more ways than one to minimize your corruption throughout the game. And on that note, I think it's time to finally talk about combat. This is the action for invading another sector, and it actually does a pretty good job of summing up what happens. You get to move any fleets from any sectors neighboring the target sector into that sector to fight. Combat in Voidfall is deterministic. There's no dice to roll and no cards to flip. This part's also important, but I'll get back to it as well. Well, that's annoying. You're annoying. You can determine how any fight will play out before you move in. That is, unless of course you forget any one of a number of external factors beyond the game's basic checklist, represented by these tiles, which you can add to as various ships become available from technology through each playthrough. Basically, when you go into a fight, you first resolve any approach damage, often from sector defenses or any specific ships. You then determine the initiative of each player and deal salvo damage back and forth, rechecking initiative between each volley, until one side has nothing left to shoot at. We made it! Haha! That explanation of maybe half the rules of this game should give you an idea of how Voidfall plays. What I want to talk to you about now is just what Voidfall is. The Board Game Geek listing for Voidfall describes it as a space 4X game that brings the genre to Euro enthusiasts' tables. This description also states that it provides the resource management, tight decisions, and minimum luck gameplay of an economic Euro. And that I agree with 100%. But is it a 4X game? Conceptually, 4X games date all the way back to the 1970s, but it was Sid Meier's Civilization that was often considered the harbinger of 4X games. Like Voidfall, Civilization featured a large but limited area of real estate over which players would fight to claim ultimate dominance, using a variety, namely 4 systems to do so. Those systems have always been known as Explore, Expand, Exterminate, and Exploit. I always forget one of them. Okay, so let's talk about that one first. Exploitation. In Voidfall, players will use the population of their sectors to generate resources from these guilds, and then use those resources to pay for various actions. Okay, exploit. Check. Now, let's talk about expansion. In Voidfall, players can expand into new sectors, but this expansion can only happen as a result of combat, which of course is technically a separate X, extermination. Typically in 4X games, players will have optional methods of expansion that don't require military or violence. So for expansion specifically, I'm going to give Voidfall partial credit here, but since I brought it up already, let's talk about extermination. This is a home sector tile. Each player will have exactly one of these in their control, and each one shows this symbol. It means that this sector can't get attacked ever. It also means that it's the only sector that a player can leave entirely undefended. Every other sector must keep at least one ship in it, or the Voidborn will immediately retake control of the sector. And speaking of the Voidborn, these are harbingers, and they can appear both on or along the edge of a sector tile. We're never quite told what these are in the lore of the game, but if they appear along the edge of a tile like this, they can't be removed. Instead, they serve as a permanent source of Voidborn fleets, meaning that even if players manage to take control of every sector on the map, they could still get attacked by Voidborn in sectors that touch one of these pieces. That means that extermination in the greater context of 4X isn't possible in Voidfall. What's left is perhaps the most unrepresented X factor of the entire game, exploration. I mentioned what seems like hours ago. I told you this part was important. Stop it. You stop it. Whoa. Anyways, I told you that this booklet tells you exactly how to set up your map at the beginning of the game. And that means that before I even take my first turn, I know not only the economic value of the sectors right around me, but I know the tactical strength of the Voidborn all the way on the other end of the universe. The one thing, the only thing that is unknown at the start of the game are the rewards provided by these bounty and reclaim tokens, which are placed on the map during setup and claimed when a system is conquered. And to be clear about the value of those tokens, in a game that comes with a 3-digit score tracker, the most these things will give you is 2 points, or maybe a resource or 2. Exploration is completely non-existent in Voidfall. Okay, I think it's enough green screen editing for one video. So if Voidfall isn't a 4X game, then what is it? Well, this is basically an efficiency puzzle set in space with nearly 1,000 pieces in the box. And that's fine, it's still a very challenging game, mainly because you can't do whatever you want to do when you want to do it. For example, say you want to expand into a new system, which means you have to attack, but you've already used your attack card to reposition your fleets. Now, chances are good that you can devise some other method to accomplish your goal, like claiming this agenda card that shows the invasion action, or perhaps the temptation focus card will let you trigger an action on a card you've already played. But either of these options might force you to take suboptimal moves, weakening your overall position in the universe. That challenge of trying to wring every last drop of forward momentum out of every one of your turns is engaging. It keeps you poring over everything on the table, looking for that perfect sequence to propel yourself to your next orbit. And that's fun, maybe. It's engaging, but it's not exactly exciting. I hate to do this, but there's really no way for me not to do this. David Turczi himself told me in a Facebook post that they didn't aim to create the next Eclipse or Twilight Imperium when they created Voidfall. And that's good, because they didn't. And trust me, I'm not here to draw a ton of comparisons between these games or try to claim which one is best. Sorta. But I will tell you this, the last time I played Eclipse, I tried and tried and tried to find a worthwhile system to aid my production efforts close to my home, but away from my opponents, and in doing so, put myself way behind in terms of general progress. I soon found myself surrounded by ancients, and with rudimentary weapons duct taped to my ships, clawed my way to a victory, controlling most of the galaxy by game end, despite a huge battle for control of the center system that all of us ultimately lost. Meanwhile, the first and only time I ever played Twilight Imperium, a player rushed for Mechatol Rex, claiming control of it very early in the game. He then shattered the space-time continuum, moving Mechatol Rex through space, tucking it safely in his corner of the universe, where it would be easier to defend. His wife, however, then opened a new wormhole smack dab in his backyard and brought her entire fleet to bear on his puny little planet, decimating his forces, only to, in that same round, have Mechatol Rex effectively liberated from player control, vaporizing everything she had just placed on the system. Neither of them won that game, and it was an event I will never forget. Now, why am I telling you this? Because those games created epic memories of epic stories that we, the players, wrote throughout the actions that we took with each play. Now, by contrast, every time I've played Voidfall, I've taken a bunch of actions and tried to make a lot of points. Yes, Voidfall is big. Sure, it's complex. And yeah, it has a lot of pieces. But more and more, I feel like what it's missing is story. Not story written in a book or across a bunch of cards or even read off of an app. No, a story that, like those other games, is narrated by its players. All we get in Voidfall are those event cards and the tiny wrinkle they add to the next few turns. Even the combat with its deterministic flowchart approach robs the experience of any amount of excitement. Listen, I'm not a huge fan of chucking dice, but there is an unavoidable thrill in a game like Eclipse when two very different fleets of very different ships duke it out without an ounce of foresight into the final outcome.
All right, here we go. You are so dead. Dead.
And sure, it sucks when you lose that dreadnought because the dice just didn't roll your way. And yes, it can be upsetting, but the alternative is this.
All right, moving in my fleets. I get to drop the other salvage token, so the gun takes him out. 2 initiative plus the bonus for the destroyers makes it 3. First salvo takes him out, destroyer salvo takes him out, and that's the end of the combat. Right?
You win.
Yay.
That moment wasn't scripted. That was right out of a recent playthrough. Combat in Voidfall is frequently just another action you take on your turn. No more exciting or tense than producing resources or plopping down a new ship. At the end of that game, sure, we sat there for quite a bit talking about what we were aiming to do, monologuing about our previously secret goals and strategy. But at no moment did we ever go,
Yeah, I mean, I almost got that last agenda card, but then you rolled all those 6s and took out my battle cruisers, and it really messed me up.
What the are you talking about?
Okay, that part was scripted. Ultimately, as with basically every other board game out there, the decision with Voidfall depends on what experience you as a player are looking for. And I'll be honest here, I didn't back this game on Kickstarter, but I bought it following my first play. I really enjoy the mental challenge here, the puzzle behind the systems, even with the somewhat sterile experience of gameplay. Also, my good gaming buddy Daniel, whom you just saw in those clips, talked enthusiastically about the very unique solo experience, which I was also excited for, at least until setting up for my first solo game took 90 minutes, forcing me to abandon it until I'd have time to play the game again some 2 days later. That is, in fact, my biggest complaint with Voidfall. I have never set up this game in less than an hour, and it is often an insanely frustrating and tedious experience. And I'll tell you this, I'm filming this before I've started filming any of this, and I'm already kind of dreading how long it's going to take me to set up these shots. The reality of it, though, is that Voidfall doesn't really do anything that a game like Beyond the Sun doesn't do, where you're moving around ships, researching technology, generating resources, and simply trying to get the most out of each of your turns. It just does it with nearly 3 times as many pieces, 3 different rulebooks, and a setup time that borders on insulting. I even have to wonder, as I've seen countless folks on social media describe this game as epic, if they really just think that having a ton of pieces and a ton of rules is what makes a game epic. Do I like it? Sure, it's a challenging puzzle. When the systems click together and you have a really big productive turn, it feels great, and you feel great. Am I going to get my money's worth out of it? Probably not. There are so many other games out there that set up and play quicker than this with a similar experience, or other equally large and complex games that provide far more memorable playthroughs. I even struggled to give this game the Dice Tower seal of approval because it is so expensive, it takes so long to set up, it is so difficult to get it played, and frankly, is so not what it claims to be. But I will. Because, listen, I've pooped on this game quite a bit here, and honestly, the deeper into this script I got, the more kinks in the armor of this massive box made themselves evident to me. But if you, like me, like a game that makes your brain itch, this will do it. If you like your games to be almost completely devoid of randomness or unwanted surprises, this will be it. If big boxes and big challenges and lots of pieces is your definition of an epic experience, then this is it. That paragraph brings me to the bottom of 7 pages for the script, and with so many more thoughts and analysis and praises and criticisms still kind of bouncing around up in here, not to mention, as I will soon find out, this many more playthroughs, this many hours of editing, and at least this number of Dice Tower staff that I'll harass to try and put a little joke at the end of this video. So for now, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this one up. I don't know, maybe someday I'll do a video about how hype can kind of hurt a game's overall impression, but not today. For now, thanks for watching this video, and you know what? Thanks to the gaming hobby for creating big, ambitious projects like Voidfall that can stand up to those thoughts and criticisms and still be someone's favorite game, even if it's not you, and maybe it's not me. I need a drink. Catch you later. Cheers.
You guys? Any of you in here? Guys? I got your back too. Anyone? Let me take it back my popcorn bucket.